Does your vision for business match what you see happening on a daily basis? Welcome to Jim White's Circle of Success show, where Jim White brings it all together. For over 30 years, Jim White has worked with organizations and individuals worldwide to help develop and implement excellence. You'll get the inside story on how to create innovative leaders from one corner of your company to the other. Get everyone on your team contributing to the bottom line. Keep building revenue, even when the economy and your customers have flatlined, and more. Jim White's Circle of Success show covers it all, from communication to contract negotiation, from personal fulfillment to revving up cash flow. It's not about theories, it's about showing what works and how to make it work for you. And now, here's your host, Jim White.
Thank you and welcome to the show. We have, as our guest for the full hour today, what I believe is one of the premier thinkers of this century. Dr. Ted Lewis is the author of Box Sandpile and many other books and articles. Ted is also the executive director of the Center for Homeland Defense and Security. And for our regular viewers, you know, we've been doing a lot of interviews, both on our television show and on our radio show. And Ted is also a professor of computer science at the Naval Postgraduate School. And this is what makes him so unique among many things. But he also has a huge background in the private sector. He was a senior vice president with Kodak for a number of years, and also the president and CEO of Chrysler Daimler, the Technology and Research Center, North America. So Ted brings just a wealth of knowledge. And today, as I said, we're going to spend the entire hour talking about Box Sandpile, and we're going to focus on it. Dave, I don't know if we can get a shot of this or not, but we're going to focus on one chapter. If we did the whole book, we'd be here for a whole year, but we're going to focus on one chapter, and we're going to talk about infrastructure. And to set us up for the interview and Dr. Lewis, I want you to watch this clip. It's 3 minutes and 38 seconds, courtesy of the Society of Civil Engineers. And I think it really speaks to the need of infrastructure development. So watch this clip, and we'll be back with Dr. Lewis right after 3 minutes and 38 seconds. So you're watching KYMB TV, Comcast Channel 19, and we're streaming live at jlwcos.tv. So take a look at this message.
The American Society of Civil Engineers report card for America's infrastructure reveals a nation woefully underachieving in virtually every category.
We had 11 Ds and 4 Cs. If I was a parent and my child came home with those grades, I would not be happy.
The near-failing grades mean the critical systems supporting modern American society are becoming inadequate or outright dangerous.
It's a disgrace, frankly, the condition that our infrastructure is in.
Today, Americans sit in endless traffic jams on roads and runways. They sweat through blackouts and study in crumbling school buildings.
That's not the legacy that we should be passing on to the next generation.
Too many Americans live in fear of deadly floods, or wonder if their drinking water is drinkable. Aging and outdated infrastructure costs individuals and the nation time and money.
You can go in any system, whether it's aviation, water, wastewater, bridges, highways, energy, schools, you name it, we've got the same problem with all of them.
And if we don't do something soon, things will get worse and far more expensive to fix. But there is a way out.
If we want to raise the grade of America's infrastructure, it'll take a lot of money, a lot of time and commitment.
Other countries are making that commitment. Europe invests 5% of its GDP in infrastructure. China, 9%. But America spends just 2.4%. And this lack of financial commitment is hurting the nation's economy and competitiveness.
If our transportation systems are inefficient, it adds cost to our products and makes it difficult to deliver those products both domestically and overseas.
We need to have the energy grid available to support the quality of life that we're used to and, to keep the nation in the forefront.
We need our railroads. We need our dams to protect us. We need our levees to protect us.
Without infrastructure systems, we don't have communities, we don't have cities, we don't have an economy.
Investment in new infrastructure is beginning to happen, with the urging and support of the President.
We will rebuild and retrofit America to meet the demands of the 21st century. That means repairing and modernizing thousands of miles of America's roadways and providing new mass transit options for millions of Americans. If we act boldly, we will emerge even stronger and more prosperous than we were before.
And several American communities have already embarked on innovative projects that are improving their local economies and the everyday lives of their citizens.
We have all of the technology. What we need to do is decide that it is a priority and get on with doing it.
Okay, we're back. Dr. Ted Lewis. Ted, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Jim. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. We did a radio show, couple months back. Mm-hmm. And to date, that continues to get a lot of hits, over 500,000 thus far. So here we are. We're doing it to television, and that clip sets up our talk today, you think?
Yeah, I'm more aggressive than this clip. I think this clip is talking about rebuilding the last century infrastructure, and my interest is in building the next century infrastructure. I think, sure, you got to fix the potholes and the bridges, but you got to go another step. To be a world-class country, I think we need more bandwidth, and we need more electrical power. In fact, in my book, I talk about the power grid and talk about the need for building out the power grid, kind of like what we did with the space program and with the interstate highway network 50 years ago. We've been living off of the 50-year investment from the 1950s and 60s. We've been sort of harvesting that, and now we've come to the end of that period of harvesting it. And what we need to do now is think about what is that infrastructure going to look like over the next 50 to 100 years. And even though the roadways are wearing out, maybe we don't need so many roadways. Maybe we need bandwidth into every home and office, because we could have this meeting by telepresence. We don't have to be in proximity with one another. Or maybe if we really do adopt electric cars, what's going to happen if cars start running off electrons? The gas tax will go away, and that gas tax pays for roads, so the roads will go away. So that's not going to work so well unless we rethink this whole infrastructure. So while I agree with what's the society is talking about, I want to push it to the next level.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the many things I love. In one of our email exchanges in preparation for the show, you were saying the right way, and this is where box sand pile. Ladies and gentlemen, we will, before the show's out, show you where you can go buy this. But this is a great piece of work, Ted. So, for our viewers, to start off with, who in the world is Bach? Explain Bach, and then we will get down and we'll build on what you just laid out, and we will get into this chapter 6, which is the one that we're going to really drill down on today. And that chapter 6 is called Blackout USA, right?
Right.
And that's the infrastructure. So who's Bach? How did this come about?
So Per Bach, his picture's on the front cover.
Yep.
Was a physicist in the late 1980s who came up with this metaphor for collapse, the sand piles. And the idea behind a sand pile is you keep piling up grains of sand until ultimately it'll start to collapse. There'll be avalanches off of it, and they'll be somewhat unpredictable of size and when they actually happen. But the idea is that this sand pile builds up to a point where what he calls self-organized criticality, where it starts to come apart, where it starts to fail. So this is the grand metaphor of the books, where I'm talking about things like infrastructure that at some point they start to fall apart, they start to decay. And the book talks about, it actually proposes a theory, the complexity theory that's behind it, but it also talks about some real-world problems that have to do with the electric power grid. The chapter 6 we're going to talk about today is on Blackout USA, and that's about the 2003 power outage. A lot of people don't know it, but we have a 100-year flood in terms of power outages about every decade in this country. In other words, about 10 times what we should have, and certainly 10 times what other countries have, like Japan and so forth. So why is that? Why is it that we have these high rates of failure? And that's all explained in the book, the theory behind sand piles, basically.
You know, I love, I'm a visual person. When I can see this sand pile, I'm just, you know, how it all seeks its own form, and it takes different routes. And you mentioned the 2003. I got just a sidebar in a minute. The date that we had one of the biggest blackouts in California, I was doing a one-day leadership event at up in Walnut Creek area in California. And a lot of the people that's in the room, first they didn't want to be there. And the boss said, "You will go," which is always a great way to start a day, right? So all the power went off and everything, and what's he going to do now, right? So we just switched it. We got some candles out. We did this. We just kept going, and it was just perfect. About the time we got where I really needed the video again, power came back on, and we just kept going. Whoa! So it's I always think about that story when we talk about that outage. Living at the edge of chaos. I want you to think about that. We got to get a quick break in, and we're going to come back. And I'm going to, my favorite word, drill down on this living in chaos. And you've got some great stuff in this chapter 6. And then we're just going to continue to drill down on it. So we'll be right back after this. You're watching KYMB TV, Comcast Channel 19.
Are you looking for a clarity of purpose? Are you a recent college graduate, unemployed, an entrepreneur, or considering a career change? A business owner or employee struggling with performance issues? Launching soon, the worldwide phenomenon, What's My Purpose Life Mastery Course 2.0. What's My Purpose Life Mastery Course 2.0 can help you define your goals and vision. Start living your life on purpose. Living on purpose is all about joy. Living on purpose is about intention. Living on purpose is about personal transformation and continued growth. What's My Purpose Life Mastery Course 2.0 is a 12-week challenging course that helps you address finances, relationships, spiritual growth, physical and mental health. You'll reclaim your personal power and get your life on track to attain true success. What's My Purpose Life Mastery Course 2.0 launches soon. Learn more and register at whatsmypurpose.com/V2. That's whatsmypurpose.com/V2.
Okay, we're back with Dr. Ted Lewis, Box Sand Pile. Living at the edge of chaos, and that's where you start off in chapter 6. So what are we talking about?
Well, the electric power grid fails way too often, and a lot of people, like yourself, as you're explaining for the break, suffer for it. And the important thing is it's not necessary. It's something we've done to ourselves. It's through a series of regulatory policies and the way the interaction between government and utilities has evolved over the years that have sort of led to it. So in the book I talk about the 1992 E-Pact, which is the legislation that governs the electric power grid, gas and oil, the energy sector, has actually led to sort of a breakdown in the power grid, which is something we could do something about. And so I used this as an example of the sand pile, so that you could imagine the power grid has evolved to this point where the grains of sand now are piled up to the level where they're prone to failure because of this combination legislation and the way in which we've governed the sector. And then I go on in that chapter to talk a little bit more about what we might do about it.
And some of the, as I was listening to that, everybody's familiar with the old word Enron and the challenges that California.
Right.
And we actually had a governor that was kind of on the receiving end of all of that type of thing. So how does that particular behavior play out in what you're talking about here?
Well, yeah, the sand pile has real-world consequences. That is, affected Californians in particular because of the Enron. What happened in the 1992 EPACT, as it's called, was massive deregulation, and it set up essentially trading markets, the so-called ISO, Independent System Operator markets. So it's like the stock market. And Enron in California got into trouble because Enron basically cornered the market in futures on power, and then when California needed it, they charged the equivalent of $450 per gallon of gasoline in energy charges to the state of California for that electrical power. And, of course, this brought down the California government, and Gray Davis was replaced as governor as a consequence. So sand piles can have real-world consequences.
And you also going to talk about in this chapter, and you're reinforcing in page 162, it said food, water, and power are the basics of civilization. Without these lifetime systems, population would quickly fall back into the dark ages. And that's what we're saying here for is this infrastructure need. And I don't think there's many of our viewers, especially in the United States and around the international sector, really understands what these grids are. What do they look like, and how do they come about? Can you talk a little bit about what are these grids, and how are we all interconnected, and who controls what under these regulations?
Yeah, well, I doubt that most Americans have imagined what it would be like to do without electricity for, say, 2 weeks.
Right.
And these big power outages that we've had, or brownouts we've had, it's been a matter of hours. In the 1996, the entire 11 western United States, plus parts of Canada and Mexico, went out for 4 hours. And that's something that's not too bad to cope with. But imagine if you were to do without electricity for 2 weeks.
Right.
This would affect your water supply system, what we're doing here.
Right.
Eventually your telephone doesn't work. Eventually the traffic lights don't work, et cetera, et cetera. So it's pretty major. So, but go back in history, the way this came about was for almost 100 years, the electrical utilities were regulated. There was the laws of the United States protected utilities under what was called natural monopolies. Now, this is an American way of saying they were nationalized, but in fact they weren't totally nationalized because they were owned and operated by the private sector, but nonetheless they were protected by these so-called natural monopolies. Just like the telephone network was protected for many decades. But in the case of electrical power, these systems grew up locally and then regionally and then throughout the U.S. And the belief was that the bigger they were, the more resilient they were, the better they were. And it was a good idea to start tying them all together. So there's basically 4 or 5 major regions throughout the U.S. that are considered part of the grid. And they've grown up over the years as separate but then integrated entities. But then the 1992 EPACT came along and said, well, wait a minute. This is one gigantic monopoly that is blocking progress, so we ought to break up that monopoly. And the EPACT does a very fundamental thing. It says any so-called qualified facility, that is, you and I can go into business to produce power, and if we produce enough of it and it's clean enough, we have a right to use the existing power transmission and distribution lines for our own use, to actually sell our power over those lines which were previously owned by the utilities. They're still owned by the utilities, but they're open so that anyone can use them. And the prices were set as well. So the consequence of that was it dismantled the one large integrated power grid, and it tended to get these local utilities not to interoperate with one another because now they became competitors. And it also destabilized the pricing, as we saw with the Enron debacle. So now we took this one big machine that was claimed to be the greatest achievement of mankind in the 20th century by the IEEE. We take this one big machine and we sort of dismantle and break it up in pieces, and then it doesn't work so well, and we wonder why. And that's kind of the state we're in right now. It doesn't work very well. It's been somewhat dismantled, and now it's part of a market system instead of one integrated whole.
In your book, there's a great diagram here, and the cameras cannot pick it up that well, but it really is laying out all this transmission, right? And that's what you're talking about, all these different grids. I don't know where you can pick this up, Dave, but we're kind of throwing this in it. Yeah, here we go. Boy, he is so good. Now,
so this is a large-scale picture, but keep in mind there's over 1 million lines of transmission lines throughout the United States. It's a huge system.
1 million lines.
Yeah, 1 million miles of lines. So it's a huge system.
Yeah.
And then places like Texas sort of have their own. And then there's the western grid and the eastern grid, and they're somewhat tied together, but not entirely. So it's sort of like a system that's on, this is where the title of the section comes from. It's on the edge of chaos. It's on the edge of breaking down. It's because of built-up self-organized criticality. And it's not just me saying that. A number of scientists that I've referenced in the book have been saying this for years.
I tell you, this is fascinating. You take the electrical grid. We go back in the piece that we saw from the Society of Civil Engineers. We're talking about the roads. We're talking about the water supply. We're talking about sewage. We're talking about bridges. We're talking about levees. We're talking about huge infrastructure challenges. And this is just one of them. And this one within itself is, God, it's mind-boggling to comprehend. And for most Americans, the only thing we care about when we get up and in the morning, I want my coffee ready to go.
Right. Well, water and power are sort of basic, right? If you don't have water and power, you probably can't survive for very long. And so it's a fundamental thing. And this is one of the reasons I focused on it in the book. And I talk about telecom and other sectors as well, because they're pretty basic too. But you need, as a fundamental, you need water and power. I want to go one step further than the American Society of Civil Engineers. I want to claim that power and bandwidth are the secrets to success in the next 100 years. It's not just about whether you can survive. It's about whether you're going to remain as a world power. And just as roadways and bridges and so forth were important 50 years ago, today bandwidth and power are important. You can't run your computers, you can't run the internet without power. You can't run any of that stuff unless you have the logistic support underneath it to run it, and that really comes down to electrical power.
It really does. And after this break, I'm going to come back, and I love the way you put it in the book, Ted, where you said the 25, I think you said the 25-year-old, talking about the internet, how the 25-year-old internet, and I couldn't agree with you more. Going forward, it's the bandwidth and the power to run it. And we got a few things going on in Congress today as far as the Spectre is concerned.
Right.
And when we come back, maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because that's a huge deal too, especially for broadcast television. Free today, so like that. So we'll be back after this message. You're watching KYMB TV, Comcast Channel 19.
This segment is brought to you by Circle of Success, a dynamic, year-long intensive management and leadership development process designed to help individuals and organizations reach their goals quickly. A customized process addressing specific needs and identifying the critical opportunities particular to the individual and organization, with results measured in increased revenue, increased net profits, and increased equity. The Circle of Success, inspiring excellence in people. at jlwhiteinternational.com/circles.
Thank you. We're back with Dr. Ted Lewis, and we are talking about box sand pile. Prior to the break, we said we wanted to talk about the bandwidth, spectra, and where do we go next? I mean, there's so many directions. So,
well, Jim, here's the problem for Americans. There's 1 billion people in the world that are willing to work for 50 cents an hour. Think about that. That's 3 times the population of the entire United States. Our unemployment problem right now of whatever it is, 20 million, 40 million people.
Depends on the number, 14 to 24 million. Right?
Yes, and it's nothing compared to the real problem, which is we have competitors out in the world 3 times as large as us that are willing to work essentially for nothing. So how are we going to cope with that problem? My answer to this is if we can build the 21st or 22nd century infrastructure that's based on power and bandwidth, then we can compete. We can do it on the basis of innovation. Just like we were propelled into this century by the space program and the interstate highway network that we built back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we need to do this again. We need to create a fundamental infrastructure that's just as important to Americans as the aqueducts and the roads were to the Romans in maintaining their empire. We need to do the same thing here.
You know, I love your thinking. At the beginning of the show, I said, in my opinion, you're one of the great scientists and great thinkers of this century, and this is the thing that we must continue to do, is to put a challenge out to answer that question, because it is real. We do have 1 billion people that are willing to work for 50 cents, and we do have 14 million people unemployed. And unfortunately, that's where I get myself in trouble. We have both sides of the house that cannot agree on anything, so we have this gridlock and this ego that's stopping, and we got a huge opportunity to move forward in this infrastructure thing. So how do we pay for this stuff?
Well, paying for it is a good question, but the payment is easy. It's think about this. We have 45,000 miles of interstate highway that's owned by the people of the states that the highway runs through. So let's take California as an example. The power companies want to build a transmission line from Canada to Mexico, which would supply power to Oregon, Washington, California, and parts of other states in the western United States, and they can't get approvals. When, on the other hand, I-5 goes down through the middle of those states, and it's already approved. It's already paid for. It's already a sunk cost. All the governors of these states have to do is say, look, you can put transmission lines for bandwidth, you can put transmission lines for natural gas, and you can put transmission lines for electric power. Bury it under the roads and the highway system. The rights are already settled there because that is owned by the states, and the people who use it will pay for it. In the book, I estimate that about a 3.5% to 4% toll on the revenues running through those pipes and wires would pay for it all. There's something like $1.5 trillion per year in revenue in things like cable TV, power, internet, and natural gas transmission. So at a 4% toll, you can raise the $50 billion a year necessary to actually build this out. So it doesn't cost the government anything. It stimulates the economy. It employs tens of thousands, probably millions of people, just like the Interstate Highway Network employed people, probably for the next 50 years. And it has this huge multiplier effect on the economy, because it positions us to be in the next generation of the economy.
You know, I was listening to this in 47,000 miles currently in place, running throughout the states. As you said, the right-of-way is there. So the approval process should be less onerous.
Right.
Pay for it. So what is the private sector missing here, Ted? I mean,
well,
this is an opportunity here, and we're entrepreneurial in spirit. So, what's missing from the private sector to grab this and run with it?
I don't think it's just private sector. I think it's leadership of the country, where you have a Congress and leadership that says we're going to do this. Just like I was a kid in 1962 when John F. Kennedy said, within this decade, we're going to put a man on the moon. I didn't think it was possible. That we didn't have the technology, we didn't have, there was no money for it.
Right.
We didn't have anything, and then sure enough, within 9 years, we put a person on the moon. We actually put 12 people on the moon in subsequent years. So where's the big vision? This is really a vision thing, a leadership thing. It's not, to my mind, it's not a money thing. It's not something you can't afford. It's actually something that would pay for itself. We already spend somewhere between 30 and 50 billion a year on the interstate highway system, just through maintenance and further build out that comes predominantly through a gasoline tax. But we don't even have to have a gasoline tax. We just have to get the private sector to agree to pay a toll. If you're running liquid natural gas through these pipelines embedded in the system, then you pay for it. And those industries are already used to paying for pipelines. The Keystone pipeline system that's being proposed right now, who's going to pay for that? The government's not going to pay for that.
Right.
That's going to be self-supporting. It's the same idea. And those industries are used to doing that. What the problem faced by industry is NIMBY, not in my backyard. So when you go to build a pipeline or you build a transmission line, nobody wants to mess up their environment, so they nix it, right? They say, well, I don't want those power lines in my backyard. I don't want those storage tanks in my neighborhood, etc. If you use the existing rights-of-way for the interstate network, which already exists, already paid for, already owned by the states, all the states have to do is say, look, we will open this up to the private sector. You guys come in, and this is what it's going to cost you, and you can build out this system, and it'll pay for itself. In some countries like Singapore, they even concessionaire the stopping points, the gas stations, the convenience stores along their highways, and that's how they pay for the highways.
Yeah, they absolutely do.
So in the United States, we gave that away. We said, you can build a shopping mall next to the highway, but you don't owe us anything back. Well, that's not the way it's done in other countries.
Right. As you were describing that, I couldn't help. My mind went to the San Bruno, California disaster with PG&E, and I know PG&E really appreciates me bringing it up again. However,
right.
However, it's a real issue, as not in my back door, so to speak.
Right.
So there is a real fear, but what industry's got to do is what I call run their business by a set of values that you got to take that away. We got to kind of watch the greed factor here, and that's probably a 10-part series show that we could do.
Right.
But I couldn't help but think about that, and there's a lot of truth in people's fear about this, and this is where, once again, it takes a bold vision, and I agree with you. Every leadership development process I do, I kind of lead off with President Kennedy's speech. And to me, it just gives me chills today. And look what came out of that program.
Yes. Well, the space program gave us personal computers, gave us the internet. A lot of people don't know this, but the internet started in 1969 with the space program. It gave us GPS, so your car knows how to get around. Right. And it gave us all kinds of materials technology. All these things we're living off of today. But going back to your question about the San Bruno incident, the government's role in this is to set safety and security standards, and the industry's role in it is to build a safe and secure system. This means applying technology. So you can imagine robots that are running up and down this pipeline, doing tests on it, checking pressure. I mean, you could build this out in a modern way where it's highly maintainable and it's highly safe and it's highly efficient and works to everyone's advantage. The problem in San Bruno was that there was no regulatory policies that said that the utilities had to maintain a certain level of corrosion or less, because most gas and oil pipelines fail because of corrosion. And interestingly enough, the government agency in charge of that is transportation. It's not Department of Energy. And so the Department of Transportation, the Office of Pipeline Safety, needs to set these safety standards, and they didn't do that. And they could do that, and for something like what I'm proposing, I would certainly want them to do that. Yeah. But the corrosion problem, you know, if you were building that same system today, you would incorporate robots to run inside the pipes, checking on it all the time.
And that's what you mean about building a 22nd century, things we're moving forward. All of these Correct. Wonderful tools and technology and innovation that we have, that's our thinking for going forward.
Correct. Yeah, we want to think 100 years ahead, because it takes 100 years to build out these infrastructures. If you think about it, right. The electric power grid is over 100 years old, and most of the components in it were invented and developed in the 1940s. So we're currently living off of the 1940s, 1950s technology, and we tend to think that way. We tend to think that well, if you ask a power engineer about my idea in the book about doing this on a national scale, they'll say that's not possible. You can't efficiently transmit electrons from, say, a solar farm in New Mexico to a market in Connecticut or New York. And that's true today, just like when Kennedy said, let's go to the moon, you couldn't actually go to the moon, right?
Right.
So you have to rethink the problem. If you rethink the problem where there's storage elements every 40 or 50 miles, and you're using superconducting materials and all kinds of things that haven't been fully developed yet, you would actually be able to do it. And that's the fallout from the space program is probably just as important or more important than the space program itself. And the same thing goes here. We want the fallout from doing this to be a multiplier effect. We want to develop technologies from having done this that can be applied to society in general. So let me give you a scenario. Today, a manufacturer that wants to build a gadget designs in the United States and then sends it over to China to be manufactured.
Right.
So there's 3 guys working in a garage in the United States, and there's 3,000 people in China building it out. Well, you know, what's going to compete with that? You know, we're never in the United States are we going to have 3,000 people in an assembly line that are working for 50 cents an hour building this up. What we are going to have, hopefully, is a superior infrastructure, low-cost power, low-cost bandwidth everywhere that allows us to automate that process. So today you can do things called 3D printing. You could build a part. You can design a part on your computer at home. You can send it to a 3D printer over the internet, and it'll come back a finished part. These are called 3D printers because they essentially build 3D devices from their specifications. Those are the kinds of industries that would be enabled as a byproduct, as a side effect of this infrastructure I was talking about, where Americans now can compete based on this notion of automation. It's a lot to do with software. It's a lot to do with the internet and bandwidth, and those are the things, those are the reasons why I say we need these sort of basic infrastructure things.
I tell you. This hour flies by, and we've got a couple more segments. But it is clear that we could use many, many hours because the information that you're sharing here. And ladies and gentlemen, what Dr. Lewis is putting a challenge out for the American people. You know, and over and over and over, we sing the same song and so many tunes, but bold vision, and that's one of the things that's really, really missing right here. So we got to get another break in, and we'll be back with Dr. Ted Lewis right after this. You're watching KYMB TV, Comcast Channel 19.
Business is constantly changing. The challenges of the 21st century have never been greater. There is competition in every field, and technology is more fluid than ever. Bold, innovative thinking is needed. Organizations and individuals are looking for leadership, opportunity, and a way to grow. That way is finally here.
I love teaching. I love sharing. I love sharing from the heart, connecting what I call the heart to the head.
Hundreds of companies and thousands of people have been inspired by one man.
Even from nothing you can accomplish if you have the will, if you have the perseverance, if you will work hard on setting goals and achieving those goals and holding yourself accountable to each and every one of those goals.
Jim White has dedicated his life to inspiring excellence in people.
A+. The man was knowledgeable. He had lived everything he talked about. He was extremely sincere. He was succinct, and he was inspirational.
He's given me some thought and some ideas on how to reset my goals and how to restructure my life.
A hugely successful businessman himself, Jim decided years ago to share his knowledge. Over the past 30 years, Jim White has mentored everyone from Fortune 500 CEOs to small business owners. He has helped numerous companies and individuals achieve their financial and personal goals. His circle of success is a blueprint for excellence and achievement.
I got the strong feeling that Mr. White was speaking from a huge amount of experience built up over the decades, which I think adds a lot of dimension to this kind of a seminar.
Wants to make you get up and do something tomorrow about changing your life.
J.L. White International is a management consulting and leadership development organization. Through workshops and one-to-one training, Jim and his staff have inspired audiences all over the country and have been able to achieve remarkable results by focusing on human capital and designing customized solutions to increase revenue and productivity. J.L. White International is guaranteed to inspire excellence. Isn't it time you discovered what true excellence in business is really like?
We're back with Dr. Ted Lewis, and boy, the hour is really flying by. For the break, and we got to get this in because if we don't, we're going to miss it. But bandwidth and spectrum, what is the big issue here?
Well, spectrum is a very key infrastructure, and it's, for most Americans, it's probably been taken for granted because it's in the air and you can't see it. But it's a very key thing. My prediction is that almost all communication is ultimately going to be wireless. It's going to go through the air. So while you have sort of a tragedy of commons happening within the telecom industries, the wired line, the AT&T long lines that connected us up as a nation is sort of suffering right now because there's no money to be had in it. And again, this goes back to regulatory policies of the 1996 Telecom Act, which changed all that. But now you have what's called TV white space, right? And as a broadcaster, you understand TV white space. For your audience, TV white space is the old analog TV bandwidth. It's the old parts of the spectrum that you used to pick up on your antenna for your television, and it was free, right? It's not allocated to money making. It's the closest thing you could think of it today would be the Wi-Fi networks, which are unlicensed. But that TV white space is now sort of up for grabs before Congress and the FCC and how they're going to allocate it. And I think, Jim, your concern is that the allocation could be commercialized and squeeze out, let's say, the nonprofits and the non-commercial entities, and that's a most likely scenario, actually.
Yeah. It is, and those citizens that rely on this free and cannot afford to tap into the cables we know it today. So it's important that people understand and follow this because, I mean, that's in front of Congress as we speak. And why do they want to take it away? They want to give it to, AT&T's a client, so I'll be careful. Right. I still love you, but they want to take it and give it for the data.
Yes.
For the most part, right?
Yes. It's interesting. The government charges enormous sums of money for spectrum and almost nothing to get on the internet. As you think about that, $20-30 a year to broadcast to everyone in the world through the internet, and it could be billions of dollars to have a region like New York City or the Monterey Peninsula. It could cost you lots of money to be able for the rights to broadcast in that market. And that's being chopped up as we speak. That's being chopped up and made ready, I suppose, for auction, where
Right.
the AT&Ts, the Verizons, et cetera, will end up paying millions of dollars for it. So one reaction to that might be to keep a certain portion of that for nonprofits or paying customers. But, it's very expensive to build out the infrastructure to utilize it, to capitalize on it.
Mhm.
And so that might be a barrier. But my take on this is that this sector, the so-called internet and comm sector, is prone to what Timothy Wu calls the master switch, where you get monopolistic practices. Most people are under the belief that the internet is not owned by anybody. No country owns it. No country controls it. Nobody owns it. Everybody benefits from it. It's real cheap to get on. But in reality, if you look at who are the main players and who owns the big switches in the sky and so forth, it comes back to the usual suspects. It comes back to the AT&Ts and the Vodafones and the big telecom companies. So while we're sitting here and talking about it, the future comm media, the internet and its derivatives, are essentially being bought up, essentially being monopolized once again. So I'm not sure that Congress is aware of this, but in some sense they are sort of falling into the hands of this by going through the auction process, because they're now accelerating this ownership part.
From what we know, they're not aware, and just an awareness, and we have so many challenges. And it's like, where do you spend your time? Where do you put your resources? Because there's so much to be done. But the great thing about the American people, we're innovative, this entrepreneurial spirit, but at the same time, from a regulation standpoint, I'm certainly publicly on record over and over and over that I don't think we got the sharpest tools that's making all the decisions, in the places that we should, and we got to change that. And this is not a political show, but it's reality. I mean, we have some opportunities there, and the things that you're laying out, they excite me so much, because what? It creates jobs. And it's going to drive more innovation, more creativity, and things that we are not aware of today. And technology will come if we were to start thinking about this next 100 years and putting this stuff in place. Right?
Yeah, well, Thomas Jefferson said that democracy only works with an educated population, and now we live in this complex society where understanding these things is really hard. When back 200 years ago, when most of the economy was an agrarian society, people sort of understood it, right? You grow a crop, you take it to market, you sell it, etc. Today, it's very complex, right? If you take a position one way or the other, it could have all these unintended consequences, on top of which there's a multitude of other players that are all pulling in different directions. So this goes back to the thesis of my book, that we live in a complex world. These things are characterized as complex systems, and by complex systems I mean they appear to be simple on the surface, but they interact in complicated ways, unexpected ways, and this takes us back once again to the sand pile. These sand piles build up, and then they start collapsing.
Before I forget it, how can our viewers buy this book? Where can they go to get this?
Well, the easiest way is to go to Amazon.com and do a search on Bach Sandpile or Ted G. Lewis, and it'll come up with, I believe it's now both hard copy and electronic copy, although I'm not sure about the electronic version.
This is a great read. It makes you think. That's the great thought about it. It makes you think. It also is a It is a thinking book. I think I've said that 2 or 3 different ways.
Right.
It is a thinking book, and that's good because we do need to think. And all of the opportunities we have with the speed of light communication, one of the skills that we really got to continue to develop is that critical thinking, being able to make those decisions critically in real time. And I think you do a great job here, Ted, and just opening our eyes to it in a way that I wasn't aware. I mean, I've had this book and I carry it around, and it's in my briefcase all the time, and I'm picking up a page here and wow, I didn't understand that. So I think for our viewers, if you'll pick it up, it's really going to open you up. Educated, as Thomas Jefferson said, educated public. And that's what we're trying to do, and that's the whole purpose of the show, is to inspire and educate. We have no other purpose other than doing that. So yeah, there are possibilities. And we got to get one last break in. We're going to come back, and unfortunately we're going to do a wrap. So let's go to our final break, Dave, 12 o'clock high, and we'll come back, and we will... a few more questions for Dr. Lewis and the time remaining. You're watching KYMB TV, Comcast Channel 19.
This segment is brought to you by 12 O'Clock High Leadership and Management Summit. 12 O'Clock High is one of the undisputed best movie classics of all time. It is also one of the best business learning tools available. The movie rated #1 by top executives for its influence on their management styles. Now, the inspiration of the 12 O'Clock High Leadership and Management Summit, an innovative one-day event and 30-day follow-up where you will quickly see what's working and not working on the front lines of your company and in your own leadership style. Learn more at 12high.com. That's 12high.com.
Okay, we're back with Dr. Lewis. As we said at the top of the program, I mean, we could be here for days and days and off air. That's what Ted and I were looking at. In the time remaining, what's the best use of our time to be able to give more information to our viewers? And you were talking about the section on innovation.
Yeah, there's the book is
Chapter 9, Innovation, Invention, Innovation, and Inspiration. I love it.
Yeah, so the book isn't about all bad news, although it is a book that claims to have a theory for catastrophe and collapse. But it's also there's some positive notes in the latter part of the book, and it talks a lot about black swans, and this is the idea of big unexpected events. These are known as the black swans in the financial sector. But black swans can also be good, and you might think of Steve Jobs as being a black swan,
Absolutely.
sort of a one-off, rare individual, rare incident, and so in this chapter on innovation and invention, I talk about the inventor of television and the inventor of broadcast TV, Sarnoff, and so this is an example of the black swan. We have an individual who could invent things but not necessarily get it into the mainstream, and we had a person who wasn't an inventor but could get television into the mainstream, and it takes both. And this is something that we need to learn as a country. We need to learn that innovation is not just innovation. It includes an invention step which precedes it, and then an innovation step which is the marketing and the mainstreaming of the idea. And Steve Jobs is a very classic case of the innovator, not the inventor. And other people were the inventors. So we need both in this country. And so what I'm saying is that at all levels of society, you can see incidents of innovation. At the political level as well as the scientific level, you can see innovators. So I'm just suggesting that black swans or sandpile incidents can also be positive incidents that involve actually expansion of the economy, inventing good things, and moving them out into mainstream.
I tell you, you're so right. I've actually just turned to the page you were talking about, and here it is, Apple's computer visionary Steve Jobs, where you're talking about that in this innovation. And I think you say that with such elegance, the innovators and the people to implement. We need everybody.
Right.
And that's some of the messages that we lose behind, especially as we're developing our kids. And you think you got to be this one high off the wall type A, but we need everybody to make this thing run. And it's one. I tell you, unfortunately, we're running out of time for the hour. Can you believe it's been an hour?
It went very fast, Jim.
I tell you. You know, at the time we have remaining, how could the viewers, could they contact you if they have any question of this? You have a website, and I don't know, I'm not trying to put Ted on the spot here,
no.
trying to put anything out there. If they wanted to know more about your work, how could they do that?
Sure, you can Google Ted G. Lewis, and there's all kinds of stuff that comes up. My email at Naval Postgraduate School is tlewis@nps.edu. You can send it there. I also have a Redshift account here locally, is tedglewis@redshift.com. So, yeah, I welcome all inquiries. Interestingly enough, most of my inquiries come from China.
Yeah, China
They're onto this.
Korea. I know you've had some things in Korea, and we had some certainly historical change yesterday in North Korea. I cannot let you get away without saying just a few words about the Center for Homeland Defense and Security. I've had a pleasure, and it's been by your leadership that's allowed me to interview some of your very talented people, and thank you for that. And ladies and gentlemen, you've heard me on the radio and you've heard me on television. This is one of the best kept secrets, in my opinion, in the United States, and it works. And this is one of the things that the government got right. Why? Because it's entrepreneurial in nature. So I just want to compliment you on your wonderful people there.
Thank you. Well, the Center for Homeland Defense and Security has been probably the most rewarding thing I've done in my career.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm still kind of young, so maybe something better will turn up, but I don't think so. It's been great.
Well, the ongoing, what I say to him on a daily basis, I got to watch him because not only is he a great thinker, but Ted's also, I like to call a friend, and I'm not ready for you to do anything other than continue to do what you're doing here. So we're watching everything that he does. Well, we're into season. Holiday season, holidays, and safe to you and your family.
Same to you and yours.
Yeah, and thank you so much, and I'd love to have you back, and because we can just continue to drill down, and the way you take these complex subject matters and make them simple is phenomenal, so thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to wish all of our viewers, both in the U.S. and around the world, a great holiday season, and we wish the best for you. We coming into 2012 is right around, and we have such huge opportunities and huge challenges as well. So we want to thank you for your support of the show, and until we'll be back next Monday, the 26th, I believe. I think that's going to be right, so we'll find out. So I want to thank you for your time, and you have been watching the Circle of Success Show with Dr. Jim White on KYMB TV, Comcast Channel 19, and we're streaming live at jlwcos.tv. Until next time, make it a great day and a great week.
This has been Jim White's Circle of Success Show. Please visit our website, jlwcos.tv. Join us next time as Jim White brings it all together on Jim White's Circle of Success.